Railroad tycoon George Pullman paid his workers unusually high wages, but in return, he expected them to pay high rents to live in his company town. It worked until the Panic of 1893.
The nation plunges into a terrible recession, a deep economic depression that's going to spike unemployment and cause all kinds of difficulties.
Pullman slashed his workers' pay by 25%, but he refused to lower the cost of his company housing. Pullman's workers felt trapped. They couldn't afford their rent, but they couldn't afford to leave their jobs either. So in May of 1894, they walked off those jobs in protest.
It is one of the epic strikes in American history, and it's led by a man named Eugene Debs, who is head of the American Railway Union.
Eugene Debs used his influence to convince 250,000 other railroad workers around the country to walk off their jobs in sympathy with the Pullman workers, essentially shutting down all rail traffic from Chicago to the West Coast.
And the strike spreads because it's a rail strike. It actually has national implications. And there's a lot of violence, a lot of destruction of property, which plays into the hands of those who oppose the strike and oppose Debs, who is a self-styled radical and socialist.
One of the people who opposed Debs was President Grover Cleveland. He sent 2,500 federal troops to Chicago to stop the strike over the objections of the governor of Illinois.
Cleveland sent them in anyway, on the pretext that these trains moved the U.S. mails, and that his job was to make sure that the postal system was able to deliver the mail.
The troops arrived on July 4th. Violence broke out. Mobs destroyed rail equipment and troops began shooting strikers. By the end of July, 34 strikers were dead, and the Pullman strike was over.
And so it's a vivid example of how the power of industry and, in this case, the federal government, were still very much lined up against organized labor in the late 19th century.